Okay.
Hello and welcome to the fourth edition of the Old Git Gooners Podcast. Now, before I introduce the guest this evening, a few words about my dear friend Steve Ashford, aka the Highbury Spy in the Gooner, who sadly left us on Wednesday morning, the day after Arsenal beat Atletico Madrid 4-0. And I'm not going to go on at length, but there's a tribute piece to Steve on the onlinegooner.com. And yeah, I think maybe when things are a bit more settled and I've got possibly more guests who knew him very well. Obviously, David did, but Charlie only, you knew Steve a bit. Simon, I don't
Yeah.
know how well you knew him. But when I've got some other guys on who really knew him well, I think we might do a few minutes just reminiscing about him. But Steve used to be a fairly regular guest on the Gooner Podcast, which I did with David and many others between 2007 2020. And so it's actually been a joy for me yesterday evening to just listen to a few minutes of one of the old ones and hear Steve actually expressing his views in the way that was unique to him and was totally endearing. So that's there. It's beautiful to have that record of him so that I can enjoy him in the future and others can too. So that's on Apple Podcasts and it's the Gooner Podcast. So you can always look that up. I'll put a link to that in the text that goes with this video or audio, wherever you're picking this up. However, Steve, I am sure, would have said to me, Kev, whatever happens, don't stop talking about Arsenal. Just get on with it. And, you know, Arsenal are more important than anything as far as he's concerned, but obviously not for me, but there we are. So I'm going to introduce the guys now, and I've already mentioned David Oudot. Now, obviously, knew Steve very well and was a regular on the Gooner podcast with Steve. And I mean, without going into detail, David had his own health battle earlier this year and came through it. So it's beautiful that he's with us, and it's wonderful for him to be on. Stepping in actually for a couple of other people who said they could make it but had to drop out. So very many thanks to you, David, for coming along and joining us this evening.
Very much my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And next, I will move on to an old friend who wrote many, many times for me in the Gooner, in my stint as editor, some very wise words, and he continues to this day to contribute to the fanzine. So he's got some wonderful opinions in my experience. I'm sure we'll get some more tonight. Welcome along to the Gooner Podcast. And his very first podcast, he tells me, it's Mr. Charlie Ashmore.
Thank you very much, Kev. Yeah, my first ever experience of a podcast. I've never listened to one or been on one.
Well, I'm sure you'll be fine. But we do have a podcast veteran as our other guest, and that is because he hosts a far more successful podcast than this one, which gets far more listeners than I ever will. And it's on the theme of rock and roll maps. It's the Rock and Roll Map podcast from memory. But basically,
Music Maps is the name.
What's the name?
Music Maps.
Music Maps, that's what it is. But I'm confusing it with the Rock and Roll Book Club, and that's how, having known the name of Simon for a few years when I was editing the Gooner and he was contributing in the first sort of 4 or 5 years I was doing it, then we just lost contact. We didn't actually know each other. But he saw my name on the list of attendees at a particular Rock and Roll Book Club event and collared me at the entrance and said, I know you. You're Kevin Whitcher. I used to write for you in the Gooner. And ever since then, we're pals. We see each other quite often at, both Arsenal events and also the Rock and Roll Book Club continues.
Yeah,
and so it's wonderful to have him on the podcast.
Yeah,
It's Mr. Simon Cardwell.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Right, I'm going to start with a little drop of red wine in tribute to Steve and to fortify myself. Before we get into the meat of the conversation, and we're looking really initially at the last 2 matches. So you could call it in some ways not the good, the bad, and the ugly, but for some, the good and the ugly, because there were some dissenting voices about Arsenal's performance at Fulham. Now, gentlemen, what's your own view on the way that the team approached this game? And yeah, they ultimately won it, but some people weren't happy. How are you feeling about it? I'm going to start with Charlie.
Well, I was at the game, and funnily enough, there was a bloke behind us who was very unhappy with the first half. Kept talking about how passive it was and how negative it was, and why weren't we getting the ball forward quicker. And I kind of sympathise with that, because we'd all want to see, fast-flowing, attacking football. But do you know what? We won the game, and for me, that's what matters. I have a real feeling about the team this season that they're not being distracted by any media, they're not even allowing themselves to be distracted by decisions in the way they have been at the past. They seem to have taken the emotion a little bit out of the game. They're playing serious football with a serious purpose. And I'm getting the feeling that with every game, they know what they need to do to win the game, and that's what they're going to do. And I don't think they care about the noise in terms of, could we have been more exciting in the first half? Could we have been more attacking? I'm sorry, but for me at this stage, it's results that count. We've seen plenty of games in the past where we've battered teams, not scored, and been hit on the break. I don't want that happening. If we have to be, if the secret to winning the league is solidity first, I mean, at the end of the day, Fulham didn't have a shot on target, nor did West Ham. That's 2 Premier League matches on the trot without a shot on target against. You can't lose matches if you're doing that. That's half the battle. So I get the sentiment that it'd be nice if it was free flowing and attacking, but the space I'm in it's about winning right now, and if that's what it takes to win, I'm very happy.
Okay. Do you feel that a template has been set for the remainder of the season? I mean, we did see this approach certainly in the matches with Liverpool and initially against Manchester City. Do you think we're going to have to get used to this? David?
How do you mean? How the other team's going to play us, the way that we're going to play, or both?
We're going to slow start. We're going to basically focus on not conceding for the first hour of the game.
I'm not sure if that's exactly how we're doing it, in fairness. And I mean, reading a lot of critiques of Arteta and the way that our team is playing as far as they're concerned, it's, as I say to people around me in the upper tier in the North Bank, in the sense that, why didn't he play that ball? Why wasn't he doing that? In the sense that, so we're up here, we can see absolutely everything, but they're there. It's a lot quicker when you're down there than you are up here. And they're having to act on their impulse, that kind of thing. It's not the same as if you're playing a game of FIFA soccer on your PlayStation, and we're Arsenal, and the opposition are automatically worse than us. Therefore, whatever we do, we're going to score a bajillion goals. I think it's not so much don't concede. I think that's just the nature of it. We just have the best back 5, 6 if you put Zubimendi in there as well. Since the Invincibles by an absolute mile, thou shall not pass. But in terms of trying to create and hammer the opposition, maybe when Arteta is not so much too defensive, but doesn't appreciate that teams are going into games with us as opposition, as opponents used to say when they were in the tunnel at Highbury next to the Invincibles, going, fairness, I'll take a 0-2, to be completely honest. We're better than the manager's giving credit for, potentially. So because we're going to defend brilliantly with that back 6 already, if we just went onslaught with everything, be 3-0 up at half time, maybe, but we'll have to wait and see.
Do you think that teams are at that stage where they are in the tunnel and feeling that fear?
Not necessarily in that exact fear, but I'd be surprised if they're instructed by their manager saying a point would be absolutely fantastic. However, this is how we're going to play to try and break them down. If anything, I feel a bit sorry for them, not in a condescending manner, that sometimes they're the home team, because the home team has to go out and attack, right? But as Charlie pointed out, they didn't even attempt to pass. We're just too good. at the moment.
Simon nodded his head there at the prospect of fear. So
Yeah, I think so. I just think Saliba and Gabriel are so fearsome. I just think other teams kind of look at them and kind of think, and Timber, and they kind of look at them and kind of think, I think we're going to struggle a bit here. I mean, I don't know about you, but I thought once we scored, it was pretty much game over, barring something freakish happening. I mean, just has that feeling that if we can go 1-0 up, I thought, as you say, I think it doesn't necessarily work for some of the other games that you mentioned there, but Fulham's a tricky place. You forget too, players had been to Korea and Japan and other crazy places to play international games and had come back, and there wasn't a lot of preparation time for that game. And as I say, Fulham don't lose a lot at home. It's a tricky ground, and Newcastle, West Ham, and Fulham, we got 1 point from those in the last 2 seasons in those fixtures, and we've got 7 from them this season. So I'm looking at that thinking, excellent. That looks like a huge improvement. I mean, I think you have to get used to a lot of these boring, quite boring games. 2-0s, 1-0s. If you remember, Ferguson, Manchester United won a lot of just 2-0 at home, functional, get to 2-0, job done, game over. And I think we're doing, the second half of the West Ham game was quite boring, really, wasn't it? It wasn't particularly exciting, but ultimately you've won 2-0 very comfortably. You've expended a minimum amount of energy. Whereas I'm looking at other teams, seeing them having to bust a gut to get points late in games. And we're keeping that energy in reserve from, the last half hour of the Fulham game was, if you watched it back, I think reasonably routine. I often speak to my dad after the game. He's from Sunderland and he kind of supports Arsenal through me, but he just supports Arsenal because he likes me to be happy. But he's effectively a neutral. And I often speak to him after the game and he'll say, if you watch it back, Simon, it was a lot more comfortable than you might have thought in the stadium or in real time. And I felt that way with Fulham. I never really fancied them to score a goal. So I felt like once we scored, it's kind of job done. And I think there's going to be a lot of these 1 and 2-0s similar to that and West Ham.
I think the fear thing's quite interesting because I think David mentioned like the Invincibles team, and teams would be literally beaten in the tunnel. I think it's different. I don't think this team has the same impact in that sense. But what I think is happening is that teams are thinking, Christ, how are we going to score against them?
Yeah.
It's not so much we're beaten before we start, but it's how the hell are we going to score against? This lot just don't concede chances, let alone goals. Yeah. And then the other thing is we can't give them a free kick or a corner. So they've got this fear at both ends from a kind of tactical point of view. It's what on earth are we going to do to get past that defence? And it's not just the back five, is it? It's the whole team. I mean, the way we defend as a team is unbelievable. Unbelievable. And, some of the attacking players don't get enough credit for that. Martinelli, I mean, the work rate he puts in from a defensive point of view, it's lovely to see him blossoming again in an attacking sense. But the work rate he puts in is astonishing. Odegaard's another one. I mean, the work he puts in, unbelievable. But as I say,
I'm sure we'll get on to Gyokeres on that front. But I saw a stat today that he's comfortably in front in terms of pressuring opposing players in the final third. He's something like 20 or 30 ahead of second place in the league. So that as well, it goes from the whole team.
So I think people just don't like playing us because they don't know how they're going to score. And they don't know how they're going to stop us scoring from set pieces.
For me, it's don't forget the Man City game in the sense. Sorry, because I thought about this a couple of minutes ago. The Man City game now, it said like, Arsenal had to rely on a last-minute equaliser. Don't forget, I mean, it's the one game where Gabriel was like 5 yards out of position, and unfortunately, that gave the best number 9 in the world 5 yards of space. I don't know about you, but as soon as Haaland got the ball, I knew it was a goal. Exactly. Yeah. But everyone has seemed to forgot about after that. Guardiola was like, "Can we have 300 men behind the ball, please?" And at the end of the game, he wasn't like, "Oh dear God, make believe excuse about referee or this, that, the other. I'll give Guardiola his due, quite open as if to say, I mean, they deserve a point, really. I'm just, obviously annoyed it was a last minute one, but they were demoralising, they're completely destroying us.
And it's
And it's the same,
still
look at
still the only open play goal conceded all season is that one, and Gabriel won't make a mistake for another 6 months probably after that, and I think the way that Pep Guardiola, I mean, the only reason we conceded that goal is no one on the planet expected Pep Guardiola to set his team up in that fashion, and it gave them an early goal. But I mean, I think the fact that he chose to do that is probably quite revealing into how, as we were talking about, the thought process of other teams and other managers, maybe.
And you can say that about the Liverpool game as well. I mean, it's the one game we lost. We only lost that to, a ridiculous goal. I mean, a ridiculously good goal. But look how Liverpool played. They were worried about us, and so we're in the heads of even the best teams because they are worried. How on earth are we going to score? And in Liverpool's case, it took an absolute worldie to beat us.
Yeah, I think watching the way that the team do their work, I do sense that there is actually a deliberate policy of what I will call energy preservation.
Yeah.
Because of the sheer
100%.
intensity of what they have to do when they have to defend in numbers, but also on occasion pressure the opposition. But I'm of the opinion that minimizing the amount of time they have to go full pelt by deliberately holding onto the ball and doing nothing.
Yeah, 100%.
So,
and it will lead to some quite boring games. Olympiacos. If you remember at the beginning of last season's Champions League campaign, we played Shakhtar Donetsk in a really boring 1-0 win at home. It was quite dull. But ultimately, they were coming off the back, a bit like Olympiacos. They'd just been to Newcastle on the Sunday, and all they're doing is saying, how do we win this game with expending a minimum amount of energy, because there's going to be more down the line when we're going to need that. So yeah, 100%.
okay, well, the table itself on paper is actually quite tight, really. I mean, there are, from memory, probably about 8 teams within 5 points of the lead. So Arsenal certainly have got some plaudits, but the current sort of more general view is going to be quite a competitive and tight title race. Now, shall we call conventional wisdom suggests that it might be a 3-way race. I personally would add Chelsea as outsiders to the Manchester City, Liverpool, Arsenal triangle. But thinking about those other teams, what's your perspective on their merits from what you've seen so far this season? Let's start with current holders Liverpool. Do you think they're actually going to stay in there?
I think Liverpool are finding this season quite difficult. I think obviously, I think last season was unexpected for them. I don't think there was a single Liverpool fan at the start of last season who was expecting to win the league, and they had just one of those seasons, and it happens. This season, I think they've got some problems. Salah's off the boil, and I think people forget just how much he relied on Trent Alexander-Arnold. I know when Salah joined Liverpool at the time when Trent Alexander-Arnold was just coming into the team, and he's played with him for the entire time of his Liverpool career, and that partnership has been huge for Salah. So he's struggling a little bit. Maybe there's a touch of the sort of Aubameyangs as well, big contract and gone off the boil. But I think the biggest problem Liverpool have got is I think they had a superficially excellent transfer window. But if you look at how it ended, they signed Isak, who they didn't need. That was a vanity signing. But the one signing they absolutely needed, they didn't get, and that was Guehi. They frankly, they should have spent 140 million on Guehi rather than on or 120 million than on Isak, because Van Dijk's getting on a bit and he's beginning to show frailty, and Konate is very hit and miss. I mean, as it happened on Sunday against United, I thought Konate had a half decent game, but Van Dijk was completely off his game. And defensively, they're vulnerable. And without that signing, I think they've left themselves very vulnerable. So I think Liverpool have got some problems. They're a good side, don't get me wrong. They're a very good side. And on their day, they'll beat anybody.
Do you feel like they've signed two fullbacks who don't really fit the system of football that they play? Because already one of them's already on the bench after half a dozen games.
I find that bizarre. I mean, Frimpong's a fantastic player. How is he not getting in the team?
I personally think that the whole thing with
side.
I think I read a good piece earlier actually comparing Liverpool and Arsenal in the sense that the Liverpool team that won the league last season, that was essentially Jurgen Klopp's team because it matured by the point at which he left, and it's a manager's first season. He's coaching obviously, but taking a look at it. But now this is Slot's team with his new signings, and don't forget, it wasn't as though he was the coach of of Real Madrid or Juventus or anything like that. He came from not even the best team in Holland to the second best team in Holland, and as we know, the former head coach of Ajax, Ten Hag, not very good. I'm not stereotyping Dutch managers at all, but maybe he's not as good as Liverpool thought he was. The comparison with Arsenal was that even though Arteta officially won the FA Cup for us, if you look at it, that was Emery's team. Because as soon as at the end of that, the season after that was like the first time Aubameyang farted, he's out. Ozil, he's going, that kind of thing, and then he started to recycle it from there. So I mean, for me, Liverpool, it's going to be an interesting season watching from the outside looking in. And as someone who's brought up by my father, I couldn't care less about Spurs, but I was brought up to detest Liverpool more than anything. I'm enjoying it so far. And I shouldn't be saying this as probably the youngest on the old Git Gooners podcast, but I wouldn't say that Sarah and Van Dijk are necessarily out of form. I think it's just that time, it's, just too old for it, and maybe they did an Aubameyang and an Ozil in the sense that, reach their peak, sign their new fast and boost contracts, and then all of a sudden, like that. But anyhow, I wish them all the luck in the world. I really do.
No, I do wonder about Slot's ability. I mean, they've clearly got some significant issues, and I look at Slot's history. AZ Alkmaar and Feyenoord. And as you say, last season everything fell into place. City and Arsenal weren't at it, and they had a free run really, and they kept most of their players fit. This season, a guy with that history, it's there are some question marks because you're looking at it thinking, if it was Guardiola, you would know that by November or December he'll have solved whatever their problems are. But I'm looking at Slot and thinking, I don't know. There is a question mark there, and also, final thing, they've got too many strikers. They've bought too many attackers, as we said. They can't fit them all in. But more than that, I just don't think their midfield pair is strong enough. I mean, Gravenberch, McAllister, would you want either of those players? I mean, I personally think we've got far superior options. So I think they've got...
Don't forget, they were desperate for Zubimendi last summer, weren't they?
Yeah.
They were.
Okay.
Interesting thing about Slot last season, I think there was a very revealing moment about Slot, which was at the end of the Merseyside derby. I don't know if you remember. He absolutely lost the plot with the refs. And this was a bloke who was managing a team that had pretty much won the league. And yet he was still having a go at the officials saying, if we don't win the league, it's because of you. And you kind of think, really? This is not a problem for you, this result, because you've won the league and yet you're still losing the plot. And I thought that was quite interesting in terms of how he was going to react when he was actually under real pressure. So let's see.
Okay. Well, we mentioned Pep Guardiola a moment ago, which means we can move on nicely. And Man City. Now, obviously, they've got that big fella up front who... arguably is carrying the team. I don't know if that's a bit unfair. I'll be honest, I don't watch too much Man City because it's too depressing at times. But I mean, what's the overall? I mean, the idea was that the team were in decline and they're going to have this transitional phase. Pep has stuck around because he wants to perhaps prove a point, which he didn't need to, but I'm certain that he would have been stung by last season's disappointments. Do you think they're coming back? Do you think they're going to be the team of old that is going to go on one of these runs where they just win every game and overtake us?
Personally, no. I don't think so. I think they're still in transition. I think agreed. I mean, whilst everyone's going crazy at the moment about how De Bruyne is still great for Belgium and in Serie A, I mean, I had the pleasure of being a lawyer on Serie A when I worked at the Bravo TV station, and God, that is so slow. You think the players are on Mogadon, I mean, so that's why 35. This is why people like Scott McTominay are going over there, Premier League pace, and they look like absolute well beaters, And he's how good is he? Well, he's the captain of Scotland. But personally, I think Man City, they are our biggest threats. But whereas we both have the biggest and best squads, let alone first 11s in the team, whereas we have got two in every position. I think we all know what our first 11 is. Where at Man City, I know what their first choice spine is, but everyone else, that's on a rotation so much. I don't think Guardiola knows. It's so as a result, their results are still relatively unpredictable. But compared to Liverpool, for a million reasons, as mentioned previously, I think they're our biggest threat. And ultimately, whilst I don't wish ill on people individually, but if Haaland were to get the same nagging injury that Rodri got last season, would that help us? Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. I've got a very good friend who's a City fan who has been attending games for 30 plus years, and he told me the other week, he said no one else in our squad apart from Haaland has scored more than one goal up to now, and he was making the point that Haaland won't score every week. He will score a lot of goals, but as we know, he misses some unbelievable chances sometimes, and there will be games where he won't score. He won't score in every game. So he was saying squad depth isn't really there, very young, and not enough scorers beyond. Because if you remember, 2 or 3 years ago, they would have 5 players into double figures every season. So yeah, I don't know. Who knows? They might be a bit short in terms of having enough firepower beyond Haaland.
I think it's a bit of the Haaland thing. It's interesting. I always liken it to the kind of Ian Wright syndrome, where we had a fantastic team in '91 that won the league almost unbeaten, brilliant defensive record, great football going forward, and we signed Ian Wright. I mean, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love Wright. He's the most natural goal scorer I think I've ever seen. But over time, we just went from being a football team to being a team that gave the ball to Ian Wright and banked on him to score. And I can't help feeling that City are in that. They've gone into that mindset where just get the ball to Haaland and he'll score. But what happens if he doesn't score? As you were saying, I think it's now 2 is their next highest goal scorer, and that's only one player.
Right,
Whereas
yeah.
what we are, we've got 11, 12 different goal scorers already this season. So if I was a City fan, I think the over reliance on Haaland would worry me. But you just can't rule City out. I think we've been burnt by City before, and none of us are prepared to kind of assume that they're not capable of doing that again.
Okay. And are Chelsea dark horses, or are they just too inconsistent?
I don't think so at all. I mean, for me, the amount of money they've spent, they haven't got a goalkeeper, which is just extraordinary, and they haven't got a striker. And if you haven't got a good goalkeeper, not going to happen, because your goalkeeper. I don't know if you remember that red card at Old Trafford maybe a month ago. It was just completely insane. And if he's your first choice keeper, he's going to cost you a number of points across the season because he'll make mistakes. And the striker, someone told me the other day that is it Pedro who they signed up front? He made a good start, but someone told me there was a statistic like he hasn't had a shot in about 4 or 5 matches. So yeah, I can't verify that, but yeah, I just look at their team and think, Liam Delap, how many goals is he going to get up front? He might get 10 or 12 or something, but he's injured anyway. And I'm looking at their other options, and I'm, Palmer is their best player, but he's injured and inconsistent. I think he went 5 months without scoring from open play recently. So, I look at them and just think they've got some good players. They'll get some eye-catching results, but they'll get some negative eye-catching results too. They'll beat Liverpool, but they'll also lose 3-1 at home to Brighton. So they did that within a week of each other. So for me, probably too inconsistent.
I'm not convinced Maresca's a title-winning manager. The fans, there's some very, very mixed views on Maresca at Stamford Bridge. A lot of fans just don't like the football. They don't understand a lot of what he does. They don't understand a lot of the decisions. So there's a real kind of there's a lot of negativity around the ground, and we know what that's like. We've been there in the past. When there's negativity at a home game on a consistent basis, that transmits to the players as well. I think they are too inconsistent. I don't think they've got enough goals in them. They'll win games very well, but as you said, Simon, they'll lose games very badly as well.
Yeah.
And I just don't get the sense that he's a manager that's capable of taking a team to a title, because it's bloody hard winning a title. Bloody
Extremely
hard.
Extremely hard.
And you can't just walk your way to it. You really have to think your way to it, and you have to fight your way to it. And I'm just not sure that's there.
Yeah. Okay.
Everything what they said, yeah. And as a retired goalkeeper myself, Robert Sanchez, I'm not angry, I'm just very disappointed. And the fact they've got two directors of football and they agreed that we've got like $327 bazillion to buy players we don't need, and we'll fob the rubbish off to Arsenal, lol. But do we need a goalkeeper? No, he's really good. He's really good. Christ almighty. I mean, the goalkeeper must have photos of like the American owner with Epstein. That's the only reason. Seriously, he's that bad.
Is the two directors of football? Is that why they keep just signing so many players in every position? Because
I think so.
They'll sell Madueke and sign Gittins or whoever for slightly less money, and you're like, what was the point of that? Because you're not upgrading your team. If you sign, say, Declan Rice, that's a clear upgrade when we signed him on what we had. But what they do is they just sign these players at 40 to 50 million repeatedly, and they're no better or worse than who they're selling. So you'll just stay at that same level. You'll be at that 4th, 5th, 6th place. And until you start getting... I was explaining to a Tottenham fan the other week, the reason why we got really good largely is because we got Ødegaard, Gabriel and Saliba for all under £30 million. And that was a big reason why we made that big jump from being that where Chelsea are now, that 4th, 5th place. We jumped up to being a contender at the top, was largely because we made those signings. But if you just buy, the equivalent personnel, you're just going to stay at that same level from what I can see.
Yeah. There doesn't seem to be a plan behind their recruitment, other than
it's completely random. It's completely
it's completely scattered. Yeah. It's completely scattergun. That's exactly the word. Yeah, I mean, maybe it's like, we need a midfielder, and each director of football gets to pick one, so they get two in, and then they'll see which one's better when he's landed.
I didn't know that until tonight, so that tells me a lot. That really tells me a lot about their strategy.
Okay. Or indeed lack thereof.
Indeed. Well, I mean, it may be significant that their last two league titles were won under managers who could organise a team, specifically Conte and Mourinho. So they maybe
neither of whom could organise Tottenham enough to win anything, though.
Well, this is true. They didn't maybe have quite the elements to work with there. Thank goodness. So now we're going to move on to another competition, which is the Champions League. And the game against Atletico was hugely enjoyable, of course, but the first goal didn't come until the 57th minute. And it's fair to say Atletico did have some chances. I mean, Arsenal were the better team. I will certainly say that, but it probably wasn't a 4-0 game. How do you feel about that performance, thinking that we're going to be playing Bayern Munich, we're going to be playing Inter Milan, and obviously, hopefully, we get through to the knockout stage and we'll be playing some pretty big teams there. Do you think we were in control of that game as we needed to be, or weren't really and just got away with a few things?
170% we were in charge of that game. So sorry to interrupt and start off on this, but for the first time, not in my 37 years of going to see our beloved club, but first time I've got sheer optimism. I mean, whereas at the start of the Champions League last season, I was picking out, oh, we'll take a point here, that kind of thing. When we lost the first game to Inter Milan, well, that kind of thing. But now I'm in the frame of mind. You know what? Bring it on. Even our giant bogey team of Bayern Munich. It's bring it on because another point only read today is we've got the best disciplinary record in the Premier League. Only 9 bookings all season because our players aren't getting annoyed and pissed off at the moment because it says a lot that Atletico Madrid were doing the time wasting. It's apparently the 8-second rule doesn't exist in the Champions League, but alas, there we are. They were doing the time wasting from like the kickoff and feigning injuries and things like that. But you didn't have Arteta getting his booking, didn't get players doing that in front of the referee or anything like that. It's like, if that's your game, just do it because we are going to score. Sooner or later, patience is a virtue. We don't care if it's the 92nd minute or the second minute. We are going to score. And then when the first goal went in, that somehow upped us. So I personally think 4-0 was a fair and accurate score.
Interesting.
I think you're right about the attitude. I think I said it earlier. There's much less emotion in the way we're playing. We're much calmer. We're much more serious about our game. And there is that we do feel at the moment that somehow we will score. And look, set pieces. We've taken some people have sneered at our ability to score from set pieces. I don't understand that. I mean, a goal from a set piece is worth the same as a goal from open play. And by the way, why do we have so many set pieces? It's because of what we do in open play. But let's not get sidetracked with that debate. But the point is, the players do think they're going to find a way to score. And crucially, not only that, they're pretty damn confident the other team aren't going to find a way to score. With those two combined, the confidence of winning each match is there.
I think the biggest positive from the game on Tuesday was scoring 2 really scrappy goals by Gyokeres. Like those, do you remember how many of them did Solskjaer score for United? Like 10 a season, like that. And it's worth, an extra number of points or wins. And just, that's what I want him to do. I want him to score those rubbish goals that, the likes of Ødegaard and Havertz and Eze probably aren't going to be scoring those they're going to score some very elegant, easy on the eye goals. But having a guy like that who seems to just be a battering ram, I think he's bringing a hell of a lot to how we play. He's opening up so much room. The central defenders are terrified of him. They won't leave him alone, and it's opening up for the other players. And again, just scoring cheap goals. That's what you need. The amount of, I think since Ian Wright, you mentioned Ian Wright there, Charlie, being the best natural finisher you've seen. You might be forgetting Mikel Merino, perhaps, in that discussion. But for my money, since Ian Wright left Arsenal, the only player we've had who scored goals like Gyokeres scored on Tuesday was Aubameyang. The only player who would score cheap goals in the 6-yard area. So that might be worth, at the end of the season, you might be looking back at him scoring maybe, like I say, maybe 10 of those scrappy goals. And it might be the difference between second or first or a quarterfinal to a semi or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, do you think... Are you optimistic that Gyokeres is going to work out in that respect? Because obviously, there have been questions about whether or not he fits. And there have been people saying that the team aren't always passing to him because they don't trust him necessarily, which I don't know if that's true or not. But I could certainly see an argument that he's not quite yet on the same wavelength, perhaps. But, I mean, do you think that... he's going to now go on, this is a turning point, or do you just think, it'll come and go and he'll get goals here and there, but he won't go on that kind of run where he's scoring goals for fun?
I think the whole Gyokeres thing is interesting because obviously this thing about Arsenal not having a number 9 just grew to epic proportions, and the whole world was convinced that was the secret to us. That would be the secret to our success, and it was the reason for our failure. I never quite bought into that slightly simplistic approach because it was only the year before that we were banging in goals for fun from everywhere, and we were if not the highest scorers, the second highest scorers. I come back to what I said earlier. If we're winning games, I don't think it matters. I don't think anyone can argue that he isn't making a difference, because he is making a difference, and he's occupying defenders. He's giving defenders an absolute bloody nightmare. He's horrible to play against. The number of times people are trying to foul him, bring him down, and he just shrugs it off and gets on with it. And he is a battering ram. And of course, he's a striker. He wants to score loads of goals. He's used to scoring loads of goals. And look, when you've scored as many goals as he has, you don't forget how to score goals. He is a different type of player to what we've had in this, certainly with this incarnation of Arsenal. And it is taking time to get used to, because he's making different runs. He wants the ball ideally played into space for him to run onto, and then to take the defender with him and on. And that's we've not really played in that way over the last 3 or 4 years. So inevitably there's an adjustment. But hey, much better to be adjusting while you're winning games. And he is contributing to those wins, even in the games where he isn't scoring. So I think he will be a success. Will he be a 30 goal a year man? Doubt it, to be honest. But I'm not sure we need a 30 goal a year man. I don't think that's what we need. I think we needed a different option, and that's what we've got now. What's interesting, of course, we haven't got Havertz at the moment. If we had Havertz at the moment, he wouldn't have played as many games as he has done. I'm pretty sure that Havertz would have played at Anfield, for example. Havertz may even have played the other night. But the thing is, we now have options, which we didn't have before.
What do you think about the option of potentially, if it gets to 70 minutes and we need a goal, we have Gyokeres and Havertz?
Absolutely.
They could both come on.
Absolutely. Well, to be fair to Arteta, he's shown he's not frightened of chucking on, barrel loads of attacking players if we need to. Because the thing is, we even when you do that, you've still got that solidity at the back. So in a way, if we're chasing that goal towards the end of a game, he can afford to do that. But yeah, I mean, the Havertz-Gyokeres dynamic would be really, really interesting to see. Because I mean, I think personally, I love Havertz. I think he's a fantastic footballer. I think what he brings to our team is incredible in terms of the positions he takes up, the runs he makes, the work he puts in. But yeah, two strikers. I mean, is Havertz a striker? He can be, but he doesn't always play as one.
More forward than a striker, perhaps.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think it'll be. I think we will see that in games.
Yeah,
and I think it'll be really interesting to watch.
I think his injury, whilst not a good thing, obviously, and there's always been a worry that, the second that Gyokeres gets like God forbid, a hamstring twinge or something like that, we're already out of centre forwards, and Mourinho has to play there. It's kind of like turning into a baptism of fire for Gyokeres in the sense, as you said, I agree with you completely, Charlie, in the sense that he would have started every game, all the big games, he would have been the super sub if required, and wouldn't have a starting. But he's had to adapt his game. Because, I mean, don't forget, I mean, his chief coach at Sporting Lisbon that got him his umpteen goals was Amorim, who's shown that he's probably not the sharpest coach in the world. And that's how bad the Portuguese league is. So to come to the Premier League, and every player who comes to play here is like the Premier League is a different level of pace. And notwithstanding his season at Coventry, I mean, as every promoted team shows us, the distance between the Premier League and the Championship is so much, it's so vast. The fact he's had to start every game and adapt his game, and not just being like your Subbuteo player, just tap him on the head to flick the leg out to finish for you. For anyone who remembers that, no, he's having to further develop. And because the editors of Match Today are absolutely terrible, and they don't show you the guy like at every set piece, they don't focus on the fact he's got 4 people around him. And so the fact he managed to help a semi-assist for the Fulham goal last week, didn't get the praise it's due, but he's a forward who's supposed to score, ergo he has failed. He's dropping deep. I mean, again, he didn't get the praise for it against Atletico Madrid because he forced Oblak, one of the best goalkeepers in the world by a mile, into having to hoof the ball out of play quickly because he was chasing him down quicker than anything. He's grown as a player despite being 27, and yeah, very, very good player.
There was some talk in the last few days that Gabriel Jesus might actually be fit ahead of Kai Havertz. So, I mean, there's another option. A fantastic footballer, as we know. He's had some injuries the last few years, but there'll be another body there potentially, and he might. It sounds like he might be available within the coming weeks. So there's another option that you can throw at these games as and when needed. That I think a lot of people have kind of forgotten about him, but yeah, he'll be there too.
You know, people have certainly forgotten about the form he was in when he got injured. I mean, you know, he was just bagging them in for fun.
Yeah.
Yes, we wait to see if he can recapture that, or he might be sold before he does. But let's talk about another player that made a contribution against Atletico and captured my interest, partly because he's got to try and compete for his place, and that's Myles Lewis Skelly. There was a gorgeous moment in the first half, which is kind of familiar for that player, where he just completely blocked a player off to stop a counter-attack. And I thought, if Simeone is even vaguely aware of this guy, I suspect a bid might come in because he's that cynical. But it was a glorious European moment, if you like. But Myles, obviously, I mean, he signed a long-term deal, as did Ethan Nwaneri, in the summer, I think till 2030. And he might have thought that he'd be starting most of the games this season. What do you think's his view on where he is now and what he's got to do?
By the way, just on that moment, because I spotted it, I saw it happening, and I thought he was really lucky to get away without a yellow card. But the beauty of it was the player he pulled down was Simeone.
Oh, how ironic.
It was just wonderful. So, you know, shithousing the shithouser. I mean, absolutely brilliant. To be honest, I suspect we all thought he'd have played more football by now, but Calafiori's something else. I mean, he's just made himself, the way Calafiori's played this season, he's made himself undroppable, I think. But I think it's too early for Lewis Skelly to be asking himself questions about the amount of football he's getting. It's a long season. The reason we've got this squad, let me put it another way, the reason we perhaps haven't succeeded over the last couple of years was not having enough players when the chips were down, and actually not having enough players Arteta felt he could rely on. I don't think there's any doubt that Arteta knows he can rely on Lewis Skelly. Absolutely no doubt about that. He will get games, and I think the time for him to reflect on whether signing a long-term contract was the right thing for his development or not will be at the end of the season, when he can see how much football he's actually had and how much he's been able to contribute to what I hope will be our success.
Yeah, I mean,
he'll get plenty of.
Sorry, Simon.
Sorry.
He might benefit.
He'll get.
By
go ahead.
By not playing so many games. I don't watch a lot of England matches, but did he start both of the recent internationals in the break?
He played in at least one of them, definitely. But he'll get plenty of game time because there'll be plenty of 60, 70-minute subs. Same with Ben White. You know, if someone had said to you 18 months ago, Ben White will be barely getting on, but there is, 60 games potentially. So there's plenty of time for. They'll be rotated, in the coming months. Like they've kept a fairly settled team up to now, but that won't last forever. You've got all the cup games and some of these European matches too. Some of these lesser ones, Prague and K-Rat, I think they're called, and some of those ones. I think you're going to see some very different teams in some of those too.
Well, I personally, I think. I mean, don't forget, his agent is his mother. He's been at the club since he was about 8, 9 years old. And from what I've read, it's the sense that his mother is far more serious than an agent who's not thinking about the 15%, just thinking about the development of my son, that kind of thing. And I get the impression Arteta is arguably the most honest manager you can imagine. He tells it like it is. And ask Aaron Ramsdale about that. I think he said to him, look, also, he's only 18 years old. Okay, he starts every day every game for England, but I think we'd beat England 3-0 quite easily, in fairness, providing they don't have that Saka player, he's quite good. But anyway, I think he's been told, look, it's a marathon, not a sprint. You're a great player, but you are still developing. Watch Calafiori, who's so good during the Italian international games. He's going from centre half to centre half to left back to central midfielder in the course of a game, as we're trying to do here. And I know that we trained you as a number 10 in the youth team. And I still think he won't be a left back full time. I think it's going to get to that. But I think the other thing is, because he's so young, do not ruin him. Because the thing with Wanyeri at the end of last season, why he didn't feature all that much, was because he was playing so much for a 17-year-old. He's got shin splints, which is obviously one of the the nagging injuries that will be with you throughout your career. So you've got to take it carefully. I mean, not to the same quality, but I remember when we signed Callum Chambers 11 years ago. Because of injuries, he had to start every game at right back, and he was getting better and better every game. But then we played away at Swansea, and they had this quick left winger called Jefferson, who just tore him to shreds, and that kind of like killed Chambers for the rest of the season. And as a result, I don't think we ever saw the best Chambers we could have got. So I think it's a proper tempering the use of Lewis Skelly.
Yep, fair enough. Now, obviously the format of the Champions League changed last season, so we're getting used to it now. I mean, Arsenal, after they moved back from Wembley, I don't think they ever failed to get out of the group stage. So there wasn't much sense of jeopardy in the old format. And I mean, does it matter that much if we finish top 8? If it doesn't, then there's not really much sense of jeopardy in the current way of doing things. But are you enjoying it more? I mean, is it a better experience, or do you hark back to the days when we only played 6 games?
I don't like it personally. I don't like it because a number of reasons. Just from a sporting point of view, it just doesn't feel right to me that you're not playing teams home and away. And that I think that gave games an extra dynamic. So, with Atletico, for example, they'd know they'd have another chance at us back at their place, and it's it's a tough place to play. That is, they've got great support there, and they're a good side at home. The other thing I don't like about it is you always knew where you were in the group stage, in the groups of 4, because you knew who you'd played, you knew who everyone else had played, you knew when your tough games were coming, you knew who. With this group stage, I've got absolutely no idea who's played who. I've got no idea whether the other teams who are level with us have had easy games or hard games so far. Unless you've got the brain of a chess player and you're able to keep up with every set of fixtures every week. I just think it doesn't mean anything to me until it's almost too late. And, by the time you get to the 7th or 8th game, well, it's all kind of shaken out anyway. I think last year, by the time you got to the 7th round, most of the teams who were dropping out completely were fairly clear. Probably most of the teams who were going to finish top 8 were probably clear. There was that group of teams around, between probably 6th and 12th who might still finish top 8 who were still interested. And then obviously there were the teams who had the real jeopardy around the, 32, isn't it? I think is the 24 is the other drop-off position. So the teams above and below that still had jeopardy, but nobody else really did. So I don't like it.
Yeah, fair enough.
See, I prefer it. No. I prefer it personally because it gives those teams at the bottom a chance of scraping into the knockout round, when in the past, the team that was 4th in the group was basically out. And it stops though, and I just think in the old format, I think Manchester City played CSK Moscow 4 years in a row, and you're like, is anyone even gonna watch that who doesn't support them? Like, there's just no. So I feel like that extra round too, I think it's important to avoid that extra round because you don't want to play those extra games. But there was some really spicy games in there. There was like City, Real Madrid, and the whole thing of not getting in the top 8 means you might end up having to play Real Madrid in a qualifying round, and that's something that you don't really want to do. So I personally found it more entertaining because I felt it's a bit, if you're in the top 3 or 4 places, you're going to go through, and there's maybe not that much jeopardy. But I think if you look at it from the perspective of if you're a fan of I don't know, a third or fourth level team, like say a Norwegian team or say a low
Tottenham.
ranking. Yeah, exactly. Spurs have got qualifying round written, extra knockout round written all over them, in my opinion. But but if you were, say, I don't know, Montpellier or Lyon or someone like that, who probably isn't going to be in the top 8, it probably, for those teams, in the same way that for the Euros, the new format in the Euros worked a lot more in being engaging for everyone. I think it's got rid of those teams like the Belgian sides and things like that, who know they're not going to probably make the knockouts, and it's probably made it more engaging for them. So I think if you're a Hungarian fan or something like that, you've probably got a bit more investment in it. Or if you support Copenhagen, you probably know you've maybe got a chance at getting finishing 22nd or 23rd, which might get you in to play Real Madrid or might get you in to play Liverpool or someone. Whereas in the old format, it was easy for, I think Real Madrid won their group something like 15 years in a row or something. So I think for those lower teams, it probably is better, I would imagine. But.
Okay.
I think one stat I read that was really interesting, and I there's always a danger of too much of a good thing. But I think it was as recently as the 90s, no English team played Real Madrid in Europe throughout the 90s. And in this decade already, there have been something like 15 matches against Real Madrid for English teams. And I can't help feeling there's just, games which were really interesting because they were rare.
Yeah.
And now come, to a penny because it's happening every season.
Yeah. It is like
there is a danger of playing teams too much, because I kind of like the fact that you just play Barcelona every now and then, and there could reach a point now. There's so much money in the Premier League. You've got Real Madrid, Barcelona, and PSG, and that's about it. So you are going to have ties against those teams are going to be coming around every year. I kind of preferred European football when it was a lot more even, when there was good teams sort of spread all throughout Europe, whereas now it's huge concentration in the Premier League. I mean, we were saying the other night, like, Crystal Palace or Brighton would beat a lot of teams in Italy or France, for instance. And, West Ham's turnover now is higher than AC Milan, if you can believe that. So all those kind of statistics like that. And it was like that in the 90s, I guess, in Italy, where they had a huge concentration of the best teams, but it maybe didn't feel quite as strong as it is now in favor of the Premier League.
No, I prefer it slightly less predictable than us winning the group by November and then having to wait till February before Bayern Munich destroy us. So it's, at least we're just playing once in the group stage. I'm fine with that. So
losing one good thing about the second is what we would usually end up doing.
One good thing about this new format is one good thing about this new format is they've got rid of this ridiculous dropping into the Europa League nonsense.
Yeah, but what that has done is it has opened up for teams like Spurs to win trophies that they would never have won in the old format, because
they're
easier to win. Half a dozen good teams, and one of those good teams would have beat them. And I really like the Conference League and things, because it gives West Ham, for instance, had success, and I've got a good friend who's a Palace fan, and he's really enjoying their recent success and their ability to play in Europe. And he's sitting there saying to me that Glasner's won the Europa League with Frankfurt, and he's sitting there saying, we've got a really good chance of winning a European trophy here. So I think that's a good thing. But when those fans then start singing Champions of Europe, it becomes problematic.
Oh, West Ham fans, that was that drove me up the wall. That did.
But just going back to your point as well.
Yeah, but going back to your point about the strength of the Premier League, I mean, how sad is it when you look at clubs like, real European pedigree like Ajax?
Yeah,
they're just nowhere to be seen now.
Yeah,
because they just can't compete financially. It's really sad.
Yeah,
absolutely. All right, well, we're almost done, but I'm just going to do one little one, which I think is topical and it's worth a little chat about, which is the fact that the Villarreal-Barcelona fixture scheduled for Miami has been called off because the players in Spain are actually not happy about it. And I mean, I think we've probably got a consensus here, but I believe, as it stands, that the AC Milan Como game will actually go ahead in Australia. I'm waiting for the Italian players to protest, but time will tell. Are you concerned that this might actually become a thing, or do you think it's going to be nipped in the bud?
No, I think I am worried. I'm genuinely worried. I think what worries me is that a lot of American owners have invested in Premier League clubs, and they've done it for a reason. And I think that they still see there's an untapped market for Premier League football, and I worry that what because remember they're not used to this kind of they're not used to English football in Europe, and the locality, and the fact that the football club is central to the location and to the the culture of an area. That they're used to disposable clubs. They can pick up a club and move it half a continent away, so they don't quite understand it. And I think they see an untapped market here, and I worry that when we get to a point where there are more than 14 American owners of Premier League clubs, they could try and make it happen. And I'm not sure there's anything in the Premier League rules that could stop it happening if enough clubs voted for it. And I don't know whether the football regulator will have enough power to stop it happening. I just don't know. So yeah, I am worried about it. I think it would be disaster. I think it would absolutely destroy the integrity of the league as a competition.
I'm hoping and thinking it won't happen because being I'm an American sports fan myself, and I think it only works with sort of like NFL, NHL, NBA, etc. Because there's a captive market. There's no relegation promotion. There is literally only about 32 teams in that league. Notwithstanding that, because the country is so vast, whilst people follow them, I mean, there are very few, if any, season tickets or season ticket holders at those things. Because obviously you've got college sports in America as well, and because there's less of a market for that worldwide, that they have as many supporters and local supporters as well going to visit your local college. They're the ones that can stay resident. So the NFL essentially are like the superstars, as it were, and then being flowed around the world. That's absolutely fine. But thankfully, because there are so many soccer teams throughout Europe, I mean, ultimately, the European Super League that was like put forward about 6 years ago now. That was the dream. The biggest brands, the biggest franchises, all put in the same place. That's what they want, ideally. Your Barcelona's, Real Madrid's, Arsenal, Chelsea, Juve, etc., etc. But because it's going to have to be, oh crikey, what was it? A rainy Tuesday night in Stoke as they play Wimbledon. That's probably not going to be moved to Atlanta on a Wednesday, I wouldn't have thought. But I mean, look, that's the key, because there are so many tiny unknown brands, as it were, in each league. I don't think from a practical point of view, this won't be able to do that, because there's no way they'll move Arsenal, Liverpool, or Man United, Liverpool matches for like a game in America or things like that. I mean, because I'll give Liverpool fans their due. I remember one year their season ticket, they were told in advance the season ticket is going up, I think it was something like 21% next season. And in the 21st minute of the next home game, the cop emptied. Did that go up? No. So at that point, it's up to the actual fans and season ticket holders have to make a voice. But I'm hoping and thinking it will never happen. But having said that, Jim Ratcliffe is Satan, and he will get Man United over to America in a second if he could. So let's see.
It's quite interesting that the only league that's really got the foreign games going is the NFL. And the reason I think it's interesting is they only play, I think, 8 home games each a season. So I'm amazed that the fans were not more vocal. Quite a lot of them actually travel to the foreign games when they play them. But I could understand it more in baseball or basketball, because there's so many. There's like 100 and something. Like I think baseball play 160 something
64.
games.
Yeah, 64.
Yeah, they play an incredible number of games. But the reason why I think I can see it happening is just because the Premier League is so popular everywhere. Everywhere I travel in the world, I meet so many people who support Arsenal and so many people who support other teams, and it's massive. I think in America now they can get audiences in the millions, in the 2-3 million range for some of the American games, and for obviously Arsenal games being shown on American TV. And I just think I can definitely see it start happening over time, because I think the older fans who are completely against it will get older, and I'm not necessarily convinced that. I think if younger people are more conditioned to it, I could definitely see it happening, as you say, when more American. I think there's what, about maybe 10 American owners or something in the Premier League. Yeah, when it gets to a point where there is a majority, and I think over time it probably will come to be accept. I can definitely see in 10 or 20 years it being something that happens for sure.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. We're over the hour, and so I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to say thank you all. So thank you to Charlie,
Yeah, great.
Simon, thank you to David, and thank you to David's cat. And I will definitely, hopefully, be seeing you all at some point again on a future Old Git Gooners podcast. Now, that concludes everything, and I'll see you in 2 weeks' time.